I'd say I love when people reach out to me and ask me for favors or ask me for things. To me, that's like the best part of my day. And some people say, "Oh, gosh, I don't want to ask anybody for any favors," But to me, that deepens a relationship. If somebody is asking you for a favor, they must assume that you would be willing to help them out. And the more you help people out, the deeper that relationship gets. The more they help you out, the deeper that relationship gets. And I think, and it just makes life nicer, and it makes life easier, and it makes getting business done a lot easier if you have great relationships with people.
Welcome. You are listening to Season 3 of the Bonafide Leaders Podcast, a podcast that exists to inspire legitimate and authentic leadership in the workplace and beyond. And I'm your host, Tim G. Williams. This season's theme is the intersection, sports, business, and leadership, which happen to be three of my greatest loves on earth. Now, if you don't play sports, you've never played sports, or you don't like sports, don't tune out. This podcast is for you too. I promise there will be nuggets for everyone. Welcome in to another edition of the Bonafide Leaders Podcast, and I am your host, Tim G. Williams. With me today is a guest that many of you in Texas, perhaps the Dallas area, know very, very well. His name is Dale Petroskey. Let me tell you a little bit about Dale. For nearly 11 years now, Dale has presided as the president and CEO of the Dallas Regional Chamber, a chamber that was recently awarded Chamber of the Year. After graduating from Michigan State University, he worked in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, for about 18 years across a variety of different roles, primarily government-related roles, most notably as Assistant White House Press Secretary under Ronald Reagan. Between 1988 and 2008, he had two different jobs. He was Senior VP at the National Geographic Society and President of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum in Cooperstown, New York. Dale serves today on several boards, including SMU's Lyle School of Engineering and the Dallas Mavericks Advisory Council. He's married to Ann, and together they have 3 children and 3 grandchildren. So, Dale, happy to have you on. Welcome to the Bonafide Leaders Podcast.
Thank you, Tim. Great to be with you.
Yes, I'm very excited to have this conversation. We began, working together, getting to know each other about 4 years back in 2021.
Right.
When I was doing some public policy advocacy work at Texas Instruments.
I remember it very clearly, yeah.
And we had quite a few interactions with you and your executive committee, just working around the pillar. I think it was quality of life.
Yes.
And we were trying to figure out a way to make Dallas, as you all say, a great place to live and work. And we had some advocacy partnership efforts that we were doing back then. It was great to get to know you, especially that time we had on the plane ride back from Austin.
Yes, I remember that.
Last trip. So I'm excited to talk about this topic of sports. You've got a background in sports, an affiliation with sports, and we want to just kind of weave that into our conversation today as we talk about the early days, and we'll fast forward to today. Let's go back. You grow up in Michigan. And tell us a little bit about, first of all, just growing up, where you grew up, and then we'll talk a little bit more about kind of your introduction to sports from there.
Yeah, Tim. Well, I grew up in the Detroit area in a suburb called Inkster, and I'm one of 9 kids. And for the first 16 years of my life, the 11 of us, the 9 kids and my parents, lived in a 1,300 square foot house. So we were it was cozy in there. Okay, but my early life revolved around sports. I loved sports from the moment I can remember. Played catch with my dad probably when I was 4 or 5. Went to my first Tigers game in 1961 when I was 6. Started playing Little League when I was 6. If I wasn't playing baseball, I was watching it on TV. I was listening to it on the radio. I was reading about it. I have 3 brothers. They all love sports. And we just grew up with sports as the center of our life, really. And it kind of informed my entire view of the world in terms of working with other people, being a teammate, being a good teammate, being a good leader as a coach. A scoreboard. There's a scoreboard to see if you're winning or losing. And all those things I really liked. And I love the human stories of sports as well, of course, because these are not robots who play these games. These are human beings.
So let's maybe pause right there. Talk a little bit about, you mentioned baseball quite a bit. So what was it about that sport that you gravitated to?
I think it was that baseball was king in those days. In the early 60s, it was before the NFL was much.
Okay.
It was before the NBA was much.
Yeah.
In hockey, there were 6 teams in the National Hockey League, Detroit being one of them. So I was a hockey fan as well. But baseball was king. Everybody loved baseball. And in Detroit, the Tigers were really very popular. And so I think it was the circumstance of history, the moment I was born, and also where I was in a major league city that had a very well-known and well-loved major league team. Okay. So I think baseball was that, and I think that probably was the reason my dad and his brothers loved baseball too, is just because of the moment we were born. And the summer was filled with the sounds of radio, baseball on radio. People will find this surprising, but when I was growing up, the Tigers were only on TV 40 games a year, so 1/4 of their games were televised. And the others, well, you could listen to all 162 on radio, but you could only watch 40 of them on television. And so it wasn't like it is today. And so radio was king, and you could go throughout Michigan on a summer night and hear Ernie Harwell's voice, on the radio, and everybody in town seemed to be listening to it. It was ubiquitous.
Mm-hmm. And I'd imagine as a kid, given our imaginations as young people, when you're listening and not watching, it's a way for you to explore a little bit too. So I'd imagine that could kind of fuel some creativity about the game and some excitement about the game. What do you think about that?
It did do that, but it also made you pay attention to the statistics in the paper. Like every day they would print the statistics, the batting averages, the home runs, the RBIs of all the position players, and then all the pitching statistics of all the pitchers. So to listen and really be involved in the game on the radio, you had to have some understanding of what was going on and who was really good, who was on a hot streak, who was on a cold streak, who was in a slump. And that really, you had to be a little bit more of a studious fan than you do today.
Okay. Like that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this other sport that you also played, because it wasn't just baseball that you played, but you also played football. What was it about football that you liked?
Well, it's interesting. Growing up with my brothers, we played football in the street. We played touch football in the street. And, football was coming along. In the early to mid-'60s, it was the Packers who were really the team, Lombardi's Packers. And the Lions, the Detroit Lions, where I grew up, were always second to the Packers. So we had a good team, but we could never beat the Packers.
Right.
Okay, so we enjoyed watching the Lions. But again, the NFL then was nothing like the NFL today is. Okay, but I loved throwing the ball, and I loved catching the ball, and I just loved football. And then my first organized football was in 8th grade. I played at St. Norbert's. I was a quarterback for St. Norbert's, and I enjoyed that position. Then I played high school football my 9th grade year. I was a junior varsity quarterback, and then my sophomore year I made the varsity.
So that's a good place, because you make the varsity as a sophomore in one school, and then I think there was a transfer that took place.
Yeah, so it's an interesting story, because my life, those few months were really, really shaping my life. And looking back on it, I know it now. I didn't know it at the time. But I went to high school in one place, Inkster, Cherry Hill, through my sophomore year. I was also asked to play on a special elite baseball team that summer, a team for the first time with black teammates, with Latino teammates, in parts of the city I had never seen before.
So this is mid-1960s, late 1960s?
This is 1971.
Oh, okay, 71.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so my world is just expanding. Okay, so we go from winning the national championship with that team, very, very good team. We go to College Park, Maryland, and win the national championship.
Wow.
Now we come back to Michigan, and my parents have decided we're moving. We're moving before the school year starts, and we're moving from that little 1,300 square foot house to a beautiful home in Birmingham. And so that meant that before my junior year, I would need to start at a new school and start all over again. Nobody there knew that I was a sophomore quarterback in the varsity at my old school. Nobody knew that I was a starting second baseman as a sophomore on the varsity at my old school. So I got to start all over again. So so we come back from College Park. My mother, who is the mother of 9, has to drive me to practice to my new school, 15 miles, twice a day. She's got 8 other kids at home, and she's preparing for a move, but she's driving me. I go to practice. Of course, nobody cares about me. They don't know me. The coaches don't know me. I'm really feeling sorry for myself. On the 3rd day, I get in the car after practice, and I said, Mom, I'm not playing football anymore. And she shot me a look and said, you are playing football. I mean, it was like, you don't have a say in this.
Was it like the voice of God?
Everything
stopped. Right?
Everything stopped, and I remember it. I remember it very, very well.
Yeah.
And what she was saying to me at that moment was, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Just go out and do what you know you can do. And I didn't even know she cared about sports. I mean, really, to be honest with you. But she cared about me. She cared about me overcoming something that was a little bit difficult and proving to myself I could do it. So I went back to practice the next day with a new resolve. And 2 weeks later, I was a starting quarterback at my new high school.
Wow.
And so I go into school now, somewhat of a well-known quantity, right? Everybody wants to know the cute new kid. They want to know the quarterback.
Sure.
If Mom had said, "Oh, honey, whatever you want, that's okay," I would have gone into that school, and frankly, nobody would have known I was a quarterback at my old school. Nobody knew I even played football at my school. And I probably would have just blended in, and it would have been a very different experience. But because my mom was strong in that moment, it taught me that I could overcome some adversity, go into a new situation and succeed, and I did. And so I went into that school, was getting introduced to everybody at the school, early on, and of all things, met my future wife, early on in that school year. We didn't date till the end of the school year, but I'm really convinced that it was me going in as the starting quarterback that really led me to my wife, and we dated for 6 years and been married 46 years now. So we've been together 52 years now. And it all comes from sports. It all came from football. And I wasn't that great of a quarterback. I was an average quarterback. But you know what? Sports did that for me.
There's a lot to unpack there. One of those things is it's not so bad being the starting quarterback, I guess. People want to get to know you.
Yeah.
One of the benefits. But you also think about the timing, Dale. Baseball traditionally is a spring sport, which means that had you come in and just not done football, quit, it's going to be a while before you make it to baseball and people really get to know who you are. I mean, that's a long period of time, right, at a new school.
Yeah, and I think that my football experience early in that junior year set me up for a good baseball season at the end of the year. Again, if I would have gone into that school, nobody knew me, I would have probably not had confidence. I probably would not have felt very good about trying out for my team. I probably would have lacked a little confidence even in baseball.
Even though you just won a world championship or national championship.
Yeah. I probably would have not had the confidence we got. But that team, that baseball team, the end of my junior year, predicted to be in the middle of the pack or lower. We went on to win the league. And I had a really good year. And so, that was a really sweet moment in time for me, that junior year of high school.
That's awesome. So you go and you meet Ann. One of the benefits of being the quarterback for the football team, and you guys start dating at the end of that year.
Yeah.
You have a really good baseball season. It's something I didn't ask you about. Position. You played second baseman?
Second base, yeah.
So let's talk about that for a second, because sometimes role and position on the court, on the field, plays a big role in how we think about business and leadership. What is it about the second base position that you needed to know, you needed to be good at, that might be transferable as you think about skills that you use later?
I'll talk to you about it both in terms of offense and defense. Okay. So defensively, a second baseman has to be a good fielder. They've got to be able to make the play 96, 97% of the time. Okay, routine ground balls, you got to just make the play. you've also got to turn key double plays. So when the other team's got a rally going and there's one out, a man on first and third, ground ball to short, you better turn that to end the inning, to get out of the inning so they don't score any runs. Mm-hmm. So I think that responsibility fell on that second baseman to make the turn. And by the way, to stand up against guys sliding into you.
Right.
And you just have
Their cleats.
It have to be a toughness to you to be able to get that done.
Nice.
Offensively, I was always the number 1 or number 2 hitter on the team. And by that, I don't mean that I was the best or second best. I mean, in the lineup. Of the 9 players in the lineup, I was always the leadoff hitter.
Which means you must have had a little bit of speed, too.
Yeah, I could run a little bit. Used to be able to.
Okay.
I could run a little bit. And I was not a power hitter. I hit line drives and I hit singles to get on base. Then I would steal bases and so forth. So I think setting the table for others. So understanding your role of not always being, the big home run hitter, but doing what it took to help the team, and knowing your role is to get on base, to get yourself into scoring position, so those coming up behind you, could drive you in. So I think understanding your role in the team is very applicable to business as well.
I really like the way you talked about that. I unfortunately had I wanted to play baseball, Dale, but I had a little incident. My mom and I, similar to you, the voice of God, if you will, she told me that before the baseball season started, I could have no C's on my report card. I said, sure, no problem. And I got a C. She told me that if I got a C, I was not going to be able to play that season. And it was like 8th grade. And that once you get to that time in your life, if you haven't picked up the stick and been on the diamond, you're kind of behind at that point. Yes. And so for me, that was the end of my baseball career.
Well, I'm glad that my mom did not lay that law down, because I did get some C's, but she let me play, and my dad too. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, let's talk about leaving high school. Now you're in college, and I know you were like me. You didn't go to one school for 4 years. You ended up transferring. Yeah. Before we get to the transferring, something I don't know the answer to. You played these sports in high school. Did you pursue playing at the next level in college?
Yeah, I went to Central Michigan out of high school.
Okay.
And I was not a scholarship athlete at Central Michigan. They said, come up here and, try out.
Try out, okay.
So it was nothing. I was not an elite recruiter or anything like that. So I played junior varsity baseball for 2 years at Central. And by the way, we did not play any other teams. We played junior varsity intramural, so that the coaches could keep an eye on us. If anybody seemed like they might have some ability, they could move them up to varsity or keep an eye on them for next year.
There's a lesson in that selection process.
There is. And this is really interesting. So I did that for 2 years, and I really began to realize I really wasn't good enough. I was not going to make it. Didn't hit well enough, maybe didn't field as well as the varsity second baseman. Okay. And at the end of that second year, I sort of resigned myself to the fact that, my baseball life is over. Just a few years earlier, it was everything to me. Right. And now it's coming to an end. Right. So you can either brood about it, or you can say, okay, let's move on to the next. Let's go. Let's win at something else, right? And that's what I did. And I'll tell you what's interesting, and that's when Ann was at Western Michigan, I was at Central. That's when we decided to merge to Michigan State together and be together for the first time in college.
A merger between boyfriend and girlfriend.
Yeah, and it was really a great decision. And we had 3 great years at Michigan State, and I really put baseball behind me, though I played softball on an intramural team there. Yeah. But I put baseball behind me. I got a little bit more interested in academics. I was a resident assistant in a dorm, taking care of the freshmen, And I learned some leadership lessons there too, by the way.
What's one of them? What's one lesson you learned as an RA?
I learned that sometimes you have to pat somebody on the back, and sometimes you have to kick them in the pants. It just depends on the situation, and it depends on the person. Mm-hmm. Some kids just need love. They just need a shoulder to cry on. And some kids need a little, awakening that we don't treat people like that, or we don't act like that kind of thing. So I learned, I think, the different the continuum of leadership, which is from one side the very sort of the emotional side of it, to the other side, which is we got rules here that we have to adhere to for the good of the group, kind of thing. So I think I learned that a little bit. But here's an interesting part of this, Tim. Our baseball coach in college at Central Michigan was a guy named Dave Keilitz. And Dave Keilitz was, to all of us, the king, right? Because he was the head coach. And he was only, I didn't know it at the time, he was only 30 years old.
So he's a young guy.
Yeah, he was a young guy. He seemed ancient to me at that time, right, when I was 18 years old.
Yeah.
But here's what's interesting. He later becomes the head of all the college baseball coaches in America, an organization called ABCA, American Baseball Coaches of America. He does that for 30 years.
Wow.
Okay, and looks after that organization. While he's doing that, I'm in the White House, I'm at National Geographic, I'm at the Baseball Hall of Fame, and he reaches out to me because he follows my career. He wasn't even paying any attention to me when I was a ball player.
As a player, yeah.
But he starts to pay attention to me as what I've done in my life. And we become friends. And to this day, 2 summers ago, I was up in Traverse City, Michigan with a buddy of mine playing golf. He got wind that we were going to be on the golf course. He drove up 3 hours from Mount Pleasant up to Traverse City to ride around in the golf cart with us, just to hang out with us. And this is a guy who, I did nothing for him as a ball player, but he just followed my career, wanted to be around me. I love the guy. I think he's a fantastic guy. And it's a very unexpected turn of events in my life that I would ever be a lifelong friend with Dave Keilitz, who I knew for a short 2-year window from a distance.
Right.
Right. So I think there's a lesson there too.
There is, and that's how life can be. The people who we're looking to get I don't want to call it a handout, but we want them to notice us. And then later in life, maybe they want to be around us. You just never know in life what your station will be. One day you're up, one day you're down. Like you said, baseball, you were top of the king 2 years earlier, and now the baseball career is over. Fast forward, now this guy who was your baseball coach wants to spend time with you on the golf course.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I would say he's close to a lot of his former players, but I'm probably in that inner circle now. And I certainly was not in the dugout when he was coaching the varsity team at Central Michigan.
That speaks to relationships too, the power and the longevity of relationships.
Yes.
And the importance, what I like to say is, not to burn bridges, try to keep the bridge open and doors open, because you just never know. What do you say about that?
Could not agree more. I mean, very well said. I think life is all about relationships, and it's about building them. It's about cultivating them, nurturing them. But also, I'd say I love when people reach out to me and ask me for favors or ask me for things. To me, that's like the best part of my day. And some people say, "Oh, gosh, I don't want to ask anybody for any favors," But to me, that deepens a relationship. If somebody is asking you for a favor, they must assume that you would be willing to help them out. And the more you help people out, the deeper that relationship gets. The more they help you out, the deeper that relationship gets. And I think, and it just makes life nicer, and it makes life easier, and it makes getting business done a lot easier if you have great relationships with people.
I hadn't thought about that, right? I'm thinking about longevity, right, over this 30-year period of time, but asking for help and then reciprocating that help serves as a way to make a relationship deeper.
Yes.
So if I got a flat tire after this, it's no problem. I just ask you for help.
I'll be there. I don't know if I can help you much, but I'll be there.
All right, let's transition to the next phase of life. So you graduate from Michigan State. You and Ann have formed this merger. You get married, right?
Yes.
Soon after you graduate from college.
Yeah, we graduated in June, got married in October.
Okay, so you're going to get married, and now it's time to think about work and life and all that kind of a thing. Your first job is local, but then soon after, the local opportunity, you moved to D.C. But maybe talk a little bit about what that local opportunity was like first.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah. So I was my last term in college. I thought, I better kind of get serious about finding a job because I'm getting married in October, right? And so I took an internship with United Press International at the State Capitol building in Lansing. I was a journalism major.
And UPI was a big deal.
Yeah,
back
wire
then.
service,
Yeah,
right? They
yeah.
they would report on things, and it would go out to thousands and thousands of newspapers, and that would be because they couldn't afford to pay to have their own reporter in the Capitol building, so they would serve as their eyes and ears for those newspapers. So I worked for them, and then one day I'm walking the halls of the state Capitol building in Lansing, and Dave MacTell, who was the press secretary for the House Republicans then.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the House Republicans were in the minority 70-40. They had 40 Republicans and 70 Democrats. So it was not even close in those days who was in charge of the Capitol building.
Yeah.
And Dave MacTell called me over into a little alcove. I'll never forget. He said, Dale, come on. I want to talk to you. He said, what are you doing after you graduate? And I said, don't have any plans. He said, why don't you come on, work for me, work for my staff. I'd love to have you on my team. I've got a guy leaving, and I think you'd be a great fit here. So, that's how I got my first job. Wow. There was no interview. It was just simply come with me,
That's what I call my wife special. That's what she's told me. She's grown up her whole life, never having to interview. That was one of those situations.
Yeah, I think so. And so I did that. I wrote press releases, and I get married in October.
Yeah.
And then she gets a job with the transportation department. We're living downtown Lansing, walking to work. And I was and this is an interesting part of the story too. She started work at 7:30. My office started work at 9 o'clock. But I would get out of bed with her, walk her to work, and then go into my office at 7:30. And it's simply because I'm not going to lay in bed.
Right.
So I'm the first one in the office every day. So in before the election of 1980, so it was mid 1980. Jimmy Carter's president.
Mm-hmm.
Ronald Reagan's running against him, and a young state representative by the name of Mark Siljander pokes his head in my office and says, "Dale, I want to talk to you about something." So okay, he said, "You're always the first one here. You're the hardest working guy here." He didn't know I was just showing up because my wife started early, and that's why I was there.
Yeah.
He said, listen, I think Ronald Reagan is going to win the nomination. I think he's going to beat Jimmy Carter. If he beats Jimmy Carter, he's going to take my congressman, his congressman, David Stockman, into his cabinet, opening up that seat. When that happens, I want you to run my campaign.
Dominoes, huh?
And I'm thinking to myself, first of all, that all those dominoes are not going to fall.
Yeah.
Secondly, I'm thinking to myself, why is he asking a 25-year-old kid who's never run anything in his life to run his campaign? So, sure as anything, all those dominoes fell. Early 1981, there's a special election called for that seat because Stockman's now in the cabinet. And he comes and says, "You ready to go?" I said, "Let's go." So I went down to his district, to Three Rivers, Michigan, Southwest Michigan, and ran his campaign. And we were huge underdogs, and we won. And that's how I get to Washington, is being Mark Siljander's press secretary when I got to Washington. But then I get to Washington, and it's very exciting. Ann and I are thrilled to be in Washington.
So she's happy with that at this point.
Oh, yeah. She loved it. It was so much fun. We move in April, the best time of the year in Washington. And it's azaleas and cherry blossoms, and it was all so new and exciting for us. And yet Mark's office is being run very badly. And I knew that my entire career I wanted to be with quality organizations, quality people. And I quit. And I'll tell you how it happened. We were out for dinner, having pizza early November that year, probably 6 months after I had gotten there. And the other guys on the staff were complaining about the office. I mean, just one complaint after another. And I'm quiet. And they say, "Dale, you're pretty quiet." I said, "You know why? If I take a paycheck from someone and they sign my paycheck, I got no right to complain. But if you hate these jobs that much, quit." And by saying those words, I was telling myself, you're quitting. I went home that night to Ann. It was a Friday night. I went home and said, "Monday morning, I'm quitting." And because she knew I wasn't happy. And
How long had you all been in D.C. at this point?
6 months.
Oof.
Yeah, I was young. I was inexperienced. Now I'm talking my way out of a job.
Yeah.
So I come in Monday. I turn in my letter of resignation. This is 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. So now Thanksgiving time comes, and and we're going home to see our families. And I said to Ann, I'm staying back. I've got to find a job. You go home.
Did she fight you on that, or she just let you go?
No, she knew that
Yeah.
she knows that I'm pretty headstrong on some things.
Yeah.
So I stayed back, and a guy came to me and said, Dale, I know one congressman looking for somebody. It's Bill Goodling of Pennsylvania, and he's looking for a chief of staff. And I'm thinking, there's not a chance. A chief of staff, I've been here 6 months. That's a very senior position on the Hill. But I had nothing to lose, and I had no other prospects. So I went, did my resume, turned it in, think I'll never hear from this. And next day I get a call, and the congressman wants to see you. And he saw me. He was a former coach and teacher and superintendent and principal. He was all in education.
Yeah.
And when he saw me, what he saw in me, I think in that interview, was a young quarterback who had some potential that he could help mold. And he hired me.
Yeah.
And he hired me. I was the youngest person on his staff, the least experienced person on his staff, but he
And you're the chief
made
of
me
staff.
the chief of staff.
Wow.
Which presented some problems in and of itself.
Sure.
There was a lot of jealousy and so forth. But he told me, look, don't worry what you don't know. I'll teach you. I'll teach you. And he did. He was a fantastic mentor to me, and really one of the most pivotal figures in my life, I'd say.
Bonafide Leaders works with emerging leaders, established leaders, and executives. We exist to help you, your teams, and your business thrive, specializing in executive coaching, leadership development, organizational consulting, and keynote speaking services. Providing the absolute highest level of quality and service, we partner with our clients to help them grow, elevate their leadership effectiveness, navigate organizational change, culture, and leadership transitions, to advance employee engagement and retention, and raise bottom-line operations. If these are the kinds of problems you're seeking to solve and you're humble, hungry, and coachable, we might be a good fit. If that's you, reach out to me at bonafideleaders.com/contact. Wow. All right. So you're in D.C. You've got this background as a journalism major, a writer, press releases. Now you're in the campaign world, and now you're running a staff, right, for a congressman.
Yeah.
Pretty important stuff. What, if anything, are you leveraging from your leadership experience on these teams as a resident? What's the art?
Resident assistant.
Yeah, resident assistant.
Yeah.
What are you bringing with you as you go into these roles?
Yeah, I think what I brought with me always was a couple things. One, I always knew how to get along with people. You know, I could read people. I understood what they wanted. You know, I could put myself in their shoes. And so when people were not happy with me, or maybe I didn't perform in a way that they thought I should be performing, I didn't get mad. I took it in and I said, okay, I'm learning here. I'm never doing that again. I made a mistake here, and they are teaching me something. Even though maybe I was the chief of staff and they were reporting to me, they were teaching me, and I was taking it in and learning and honing all the time, and not being too proud to say we're doing it this way because I said so.
Yeah.
It was okay. What do you think about this?
So here's a question for you, Dale. Hypothetical. Let's imagine that you, you continue to be on the staff with the unprofessionalism and lack of good quality stuff, and you go and you do that for a number of years. Maybe you got 5 years of experience in D.C. or 10 years.
Yeah.
Then someone asks you to be chief of staff. What's different?
Oh, you know, I think the most important career decision I ever made was quitting. Just in my heart of hearts, I had an instinct that this was not going well. And by the way, that congressman has been to jail twice since.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had an instinct
Yeah.
that I did not want to be part of this. So I leave that, and then I go to something very good. I have a great boss who cares about teaching me and has got my back with his staff and makes me his right hand.
Right hand, yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, I would. There's an old saying, Tim. It's a Midwest saying, is being hidden under the bushel basket. In other words, there's a lot of talent out there, and yet it's sometimes it never sees the light of day because you're in the wrong office, you're in the wrong position, you're in the wrong venue. I mean, I say this about St. Marshall. St. Marshall was a major, major player at AT&T for many, many years, but she was not the CEO. And so she was hidden under the bushel basket. When the Mavs and Mark made her the CEO of the Dallas Mavericks, all of a sudden, everybody saw the leadership qualities of St. Marshall, right?
There's another phrase, we call it diamond in the rough.
Yeah, similar. Yeah, exactly. So I think you have to be in the right position, in the right organization, in order to excel. Yeah. And sometimes you're just not. That somebody doesn't see the same things in you that somebody else sees in you.
Right.
So they pigeonhole you into a position where you feel very frustrated because you got more to give than they know you've got to give.
Right.
And I've been in those positions, by the way, in my career.
And that's a helpful, I think, input for the listener. There's somebody listening now, and they're in a job, and they don't feel like they're able to exhibit their full potential. And maybe it's, a situation where their skill doesn't necessarily match the role, or maybe their natural personality, DNA, doesn't match the culture of that organization, what have you. And there's sometimes leaders who just can't see everything, right? Leaders are busy, and sometimes you miss out on seeing those people who have some special talents.
Yes.
And it's awesome that this congressman from Pennsylvania saw something in you.
Yeah. But I would say this to your listeners who are feeling that right now. Go find another job. You're in the wrong place. And it's so amazing to be in a place that you feel comfortable in, that you're making a difference in, versus a place where you go to work every day and it's hard for you to even get out of bed to go to that job because you don't like the people you're working with.
Right.
They don't see your skills, and you're going nowhere.
Yeah.
So get out of that, and maybe you need to start quietly looking for another job, or you need to find a better fit that fits your skills and your temperament and the way you look at the world.
Yeah. See, that's a perfect soundbite for last season. Making the leap, that would have been great. It's still great for all times. Hopefully somebody listening.
It's a truism. It's a truism for all times, Tim.
All right, so look, you're in D.C., and I think it's pretty well chronicled that you worked in the White House, and you worked under President Ronald Reagan. Can you talk a little bit about just what the experience was like working in the White House, particularly given your background coming from this 1,300 square foot home for most of your life, many siblings, and this means you have to share a whole lot.
Yeah.
And now you're in literally the place that people dream of being at. What was that experience like for you?
It was an out-of-body experience, certainly at the beginning. I couldn't believe that here I am, 50 feet from the Oval Office every day. That's where my office was, 50 feet from the Oval Office. And working for that president. I mean, the most revered president of our lifetime.
One who almost everyone liked. That kind of a thing, right?
Yeah. When I got there, in April of 1985, his popularity rating was 75%, which means that 100% of the Republicans loved him and half the Democrats loved him. And we have never seen that before. But he had such an appeal. And it was such a great time in American history. He had just come off a landslide victory. He won 49 out of 50 states in 1984.
I didn't remember that.
And that was just a couple months after that. In fact, there's a great story, and this will tell you all you need to know about Ronald Reagan. He was running against Walter Mondale, who had been Jimmy Carter's vice president. And Mondale was from Minnesota. And late in the campaign, some of President Reagan's political advisors came to him and said, "Mr. President, we think we can even get Minnesota, and it would make it a 50-state sweep." And he said, "Oh, guys, can't we just let him have one state? Can't we let him have his own state?" And he refused to go to Minnesota.
Is that right? He didn't travel there, huh?
He did not want Mondale to be embarrassed in his home state.
Wow.
And Mondale won it by 0.2%. If Reagan had gone, he certainly would have won Minnesota. But he did not. That's the kind of guy he was. Let him have a little bit of dignity,
This is a complete tangent, but I'm just curious. This is the curious mind. It seems like the polling back then seems to maybe have even been more accurate than today.
Oh, no question. And you know why, Tim? There was not all these different forms of media.
So you had a single source, if you will.
So growing up, here's what it was. You had newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
You had 3 major magazines, Time, Newsweek, and U.S. News.
Yeah.
You had the news services, UPI, AP, AFP, the French press agency,
mm-hmm.
and Reuters. You had 4 networks because CNN had just come on. You had ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. That was the media. And now it's coming at you from every which way, and no editing with it at all. And people are listening to things that confirm their beliefs already.
Right.
And, so there's all this stuff going on now, so it's hard to get a handle on what's really going on.
In a world that is evolving more and more technologically sophisticated, it's just crazy that 40 years ago we could get it down to that level of accuracy. I think you're going to win 49 out of 50. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
You would think that with the advancements that we have, but yet I understand what you're saying, right? The stratification of the media actually complicates the issue. Yeah, that's...
I do think, maybe I'm showing my age here a little bit, but I do think it was a more predictable and stable world.
True. That's true.
For folks back then. And you could go to bed with a little bit of peace of mind,
mm-hmm.
a little bit more than you can today.
True. All right. So you go and do a number of roles after the White House job. And I want to fast forward to, is it National Geographic,
mm-hmm.
the first role you get out of D.C.,
mm-hmm.
right?
No, it was in D.C.
Oh, it was in D.C.?
Still in D.C., yeah. 4 blocks north of the White House. Yeah.
How long were you?
12 years. I was in National Geographic 12 years.
And you were there in Washington, D.C. all that time?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So National Geographic is, for a kid like me, I remember every time I went to the doctor's office or the dentist's office, I'm trying to think probably some other office, that's what you had laid out. There were 2 books. There's that one that had the kids' stories. I can't remember the name of it.
Ranger
right
Rick or something.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, right.
And then you had the National Geographic.
Yeah.
So it's something that everybody who is sort of in my generation, Generation X, or millennials, older millennials, and that, I mean, this is what you grew up with.
Right.
Was it similar for you as a kid? Was National Geographic that big for you as a kid when you were growing up?
It wasn't in my house that big of a deal. Mm-hmm. Of course, we would see the magazines but we were not subscribers to National Geographic in my house.
Yeah.
My wife's family, Ann's family, they loved nature and the outdoors, and they were more of the National Geographic family. Mm-hmm. So I'd say National Geographic. When I was asked to come over to National Geographic, Ann was very excited because it meant the natural world, and that really was what she cared about. And so that was a really fun experience because we got to meet all the great explorers in the world. It was Jane Goodall, and who did all her work on chimpanzees, mm-hmm. and Bob Ballard, who discovered the Titanic, and Dr. Sylvia Earle, the great marine biologist, and all these folks who were just they were the Hall of Famers of the natural world, and we became friends with them. So it was fun.
So, a question for you: coolest or most exciting or adventurous exploration, if you had a chance to do any of those, which one stood out the most to you?
Wow. That's a great question. They would come back from their travels, and I'd get a chance to sit down with them and see their pictures and see what their stories were going to look like and mm-hmm. so forth. But, I mean, it could be from climbing to the top of Everest to Antarctica with Will Steger, to swimming with the whales, Flip Nicklin. It's just an incredible array of specialties mm-hmm. within the geographic.
Wow. So you had this period of time, this gap, where you're not necessarily affiliated officially with sports,
mm-hmm.
right? Your last time is kind of at Central Michigan on the JV team. You have kids that come along, so I imagine maybe there's some sports that way. But mm-hmm. can you talk a little bit about how you stayed connected to the world of sports while you had this gap of time before you go to the next thing, which we'll talk about, which was Cooperstown?
Yeah, it really kind of all ties together. In 1983, I'm working on Capitol Hill for Congressman Goodling. And my brother is working on Capitol Hill, my brother Denny, is working on Capitol Hill for a congressman from Connecticut, Nancy Johnson. And the Tigers, our Detroit Tigers, are getting pretty good at that time. And we have another friend named Bill McKay, so the three of us. And we get together and we say, you know what? Why don't we start a group on Capitol Hill that is a Detroit Tigers fan club. And then we said, what should we call it? Well, we said, we'll call it the Mayo Smith Society, because Mayo Smith was the last manager of a world championship team in Detroit. He managed the '68 Tigers, a very forgettable figure, by the way. And the trick was, or the joke was, if you don't know who Mayo Smith was, you don't know this is a Tigers fan club. But if you do, if you're a real Tigers fan, you'll know who Mayo Smith was.
I see. That's
so
nice.
we draft a letter, and we walk it around to every Michigan congressional office and the two senatorial offices. Don Regal and Carl Levin were two United States senators in those days. And the letter says, we're starting the Mayo Smith Society, a great Detroit Tigers fan club, breakfast in the Longworth cafeteria, 9 o'clock every Friday morning. The only rule is no politics allowed at the table.
There you go.
We wanted Democrats, we wanted Republicans to talk baseball.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, people started showing up. And there was 10, then 20, then 40, because the Tigers were getting good. They won it in 84. This is 83. This is the year before they actually won it. They're building a pretty good team here. So the Wall Street Journal gets wind of this. And one of our members wrote for the Wall Street Journal, and they do a story on the Mayo Smith Society. And my brother and I are featured in it. And we become known as the baseball guys on Capitol Hill.
Goodness, that's incredible.
So here's the story, Tim. So my friend David Bechtel, who I worked with in Washington, and I worked in the Reagan White House, he worked in the Bush White House.
Okay.
He helped me move my stuff into my office in the White House when I moved on from Congressman Goodling. He and my brother helped move me. And one of the framed things was the Wall Street Journal article. So fast forward, that was 1985, fast forward 14 years. He marries a woman who has ties to Cooperstown, New York, which is where the Baseball Hall of Fame is. And I've been at National Geographic 12 years. He calls me one day and said, Dale, there's a job you need to have. And I said, I already got the job I need to have. He said, I mean it, president of the Baseball Hall of Fame. I said, really? Really? He said, I don't know anybody who loves baseball more than you. You've got White House experience. You've got National Geographic experience. You're running a big nonprofit. I think you'd be great for this. And so that's how I learned about the Baseball Hall of Fame, because of the Mayo Smith Society, which we did as a lark years before, but David never forgot it.
That's pretty incredible.
So crazy stories, right?
Well, and that one just underscores the power of passion. Right? You had this love for this game, despite the fact that you hadn't played it in whatever.
Yeah.
You create this fan club, which I think is hilarious, that builds itself. The team gets good. You get a Wall Street Journal connection, and next thing you know, he remembers your love for this thing and calls you when there's this opportunity.
Yeah, he's thinking to himself, who do I know who would be really good at this and would really bring a passion to this? And he thinks of me because of the Mayo Smith Society.
That's incredible.
So
if you were wondering, listeners, should you pursue the money or pursue the passion? Unless you just gotta have the money, I think passion wins out over time. What do you say, Dale?
I'll tell you a story. Just this week, I get a call from a headhunter. They're looking for the new CEO of the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts.
I've been there, by the way.
Yeah.
That's the only Hall of Fame I've been to.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, we'll get you to Cooperstown one of these days. But he said, who should we be looking for? And I said, I'll tell you who I think you should be looking for. First of all, you need somebody with passion, who loves it, and it's obvious that when they get up and talk about the history of basketball, or Magic Johnson, Larry Bird era, or Michael Jordan, or Luka even today, right? That you're passionate about it, right? So I said I would go and find the author of the greatest book on NBA history ever written and start there, because they know all the stories And they obviously have a passion for it. And maybe they don't want the job, or maybe they're not qualified in other ways for the job, but they will lead you to people who are passionate about that job. Or I would go to look at the broadcasters who broadcast NBA games, who have loved this game most of their lives. Mark Followell for the Mavs, fantastic example, right? Just passionate about it. And maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to go do something else and take that passion for the Mavs and broadcasting to somebody who really wants to get to know Julius Erving and all these other great players from the past and bring them together. But you need somebody who really lives and breathes and sleeps this stuff.
Love that. Okay, so this is a strange question, perhaps, but you've lived in the North, Midwest, Atlantic coast, D.C., the nation's capital, and then this town, Clifton. I don't exactly know where that is in Virginia.
Outside of Washington, D.C.
Okay, outside of Washington, D.C. So that's kind of where you've been.
Yeah.
You get this call asking you to come consider a Texas Rangers opportunity.
Yeah.
You've never lived in the South.
Yeah.
What were the considerations for you? And I'm just curious, second question, what was it like in that early period living in the South for the first time?
Yeah. Well, when I was at the base, first of all, when I was at National Geographic, I traveled the whole country. We had a 50-state geography program to get geography back into American classrooms and make sure it was well taught and well learned. So I traveled all over, and I'd been to Dallas quite a bit because Dallas was a good place for us to be. So
Even though we had no ocean.
Yeah, I knew about Dallas.
Okay.
I had friends in Dallas. Our daughter, of all things, grew up in Cooperstown, went to SMU. And so she had been a student in Dallas. And so I was familiar with Dallas.
Okay.
But yeah, when Nolan called and asked if I'd come down and be executive vice president of marketing for him and the Rangers, and we'd been in Cooperstown 9 years at that point, I thought, you know what, that might be a nice next thing to do. I always thought it might be kind of interesting to be part of a ball club. Actually, the president of the American League, when I started in Cooperstown, had seen me there for a couple of years and seen me do what I do. And he said, Dale, you'd be a perfect president of a major league club. So that always stuck in the back of my head that maybe that's my next thing. But I get down here, and Mr. Hicks, Tom Hicks, owned the team, and really was getting ready to sell the team. He was, trying to get some cash out of some of his entities, and that was the Stars were one, and then the Rangers were the other. Liverpool, was his club in the English Premier League.
Yep.
And so I get here at the wrong time. Again, wrong time. And we were just always, just doing things on the cheap because we didn't want to spend money. We wanted to get the team ready to sell.
Cash was a challenge.
And then they sold the team.
Okay.
And they brought their own people in to run it, and I was gone. And so, the lesson, and again, it was not a great fit for me.
Which part? Because you thought being a part of a club is something that you wanted to do. Was it just different than what you thought, or was it the financial issues that was?
I think it was a little bit of both.
Okay.
But I'll tell you what I think it was, partially. I had tasted being a CEO at the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And I liked calling the shots. And now I'm just one of many senior vice presidents or executive vice presidents for the Rangers. And, you can give your advice, but they don't have to take it. And it wasn't as much fun for me.
I see.
And so I think that was not very appealing. And then, of course, they sold the team. I'm out. I'm brushed out. And so I was only there for 2 years. But another story about that. You can get mad, and you can go away angry, or you can say, you know what? It was the circumstances. I stayed in great touch with everybody at the Rangers.
Okay.
After that, today I serve on the Texas Rangers Baseball Foundation Board. The Rangers invited me to go to the White House with them a few months ago when President Biden was there giving them the trophy. I'm always invited to the big things that they do because we have a good relationship.
Yeah, you maintained that bridge.
Exactly.
You kept it, despite perhaps the circumstances weren't the best.
Yeah, and a lot of people. A friend of mine just got let go from a big job, and I said, let me give you a bit of advice. Mm-hmm. Never burn the bridge. Keep your relationships, and because you know what, it's all a matter of the moment and the circumstances. But people are, and relationships are the things that last. Yeah, and you need to always have those good relationships.
All right, I love that. As we get ready to make our way towards the tail end of this thing, I want to ask you, maybe someone's asked you this before, but I'm just curious what you'd say. What's your best memory of sports, whether it be childhood, whether it be you playing, participating, coaching, being a part of any of these great organizations and institutions? What would you say is your singular best moment in sports?
I think my best, I'll give you two moments, but I'll give you one as a personal moment. And that is winning the national championship in baseball we actually won 2 years in a row when I was 15 and then again when I was 16. I was the only starting position player as a 15-year-old on that first team. Wow. And then so we won that year, then we won the next year again. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is, baseball takes all 9 players on the field to win. Yeah. Everybody's got to do their job.
They do.
and when you go through a summer, you become a brotherhood. I mean, there are 16 of you, and you are seeing each other 5-6 nights a week, and it's the next game, and it culminates in being the best team in the country. Not only the best team in the city of Detroit, the best team in the regions, but the best team in the country, and that to me is quite an accomplishment. Mm-hmm. So when you see Super Bowl champions or NBA champions or World Series champions or Stanley Cup champions, it's the same feeling that it's a grind. It's a grind from preseason to the season and all the ups and downs of the season to the playoffs when you all gel at the same time and go on and prove that you're the best team. And so I think that is a thrilling thing. And I'll say this about that. I feel that that's what the Dallas Regional Chamber is today, because we have put together a team, an all-star team, and we just perform every single day because the standards are high. And I feel like we are a championship team, and it's really fun and wonderful to be part of that championship team because you feel like these are your brothers and sisters, and we know that we're doing good work for this community. Yeah. So I equate those two things: my team winning the national championship when I was 15 and 16, and what we've built here at the Dallas Regional Chamber too. My second favorite moment, probably in sports, was my first night at the Hall of Fame. It was a reception, and I invited my dad to be with me the first weekend. And just my dad. Ann stayed back with the kids, and I just wanted to share that weekend with my dad because he's the one who taught me to love baseball. Right. And so the receiving line is there, and now I'm part of the receiving line, and here comes Willie Mays and Hank Aaron and Stan Musial and Nolan Ryan and Al Kaline and Ernie Banks, and they're welcoming me as the new guy to Cooperstown, right? Mm. And my dad's standing off to the side about 30 feet away, and I look over, and he's got tears streaming down his face. And after the event, we're going back to our place, and I said, "Dad, everything okay?" And he said, "Yeah, why do you ask?" I said, well, I looked over, and you looked upset about something. He said, "Upset?" He says, when I was playing catch with you as a little boy, I never dreamed I was playing catch with the future president of the Baseball Hall of Fame." And that was a pretty special moment for me, too.
Yeah. Nothing like that, sharing that with the person who put the ball in your hand for the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
And as a dad myself, I'd imagine that's pretty special.
Yeah.
Okay. So give us something on the inside. So as fans, we love our teams. We're passionate about our teams. We love them. And at the same time, it's different when you work on the inside of the sports world. Give us maybe some insight into what it's like that's different that the casual fan may not see when you work at the actual Baseball Hall of Fame or when you work for the Texas Rangers that a casual fan may not really have an understanding of what it's really like on the inside of the building. Give us some insight.
Yeah, that's interesting. I loved working at the Hall of Fame, so it's hard to think of things. But here's a surprise. This was a surprise to me.
Okay.
That not every Hall of Famer still loves watching baseball.
Wow.
That, you invite them to a game, or we were going to go to a game together, and they say, not interested. Not interested in sitting around watching somebody else play. I've seen enough baseball games in my life.
Yeah, but
now some of them still loved it and still followed it, and we're up on everything. But for some of them, it's what they did.
Yeah.
They did really well at it, but at this point in their life, they're moving on. And that kind of surprised me a little bit, to be honest with you. In terms of the Rangers and being part of that, there's the side of it which is when players get traded, when players get cut. Everybody sees, they tune in that night, and there's 25 players on each roster, and you watch a game. But they're not thinking about all the personal stuff that's going on in the background.
Right.
Which is, this guy just got sent back to the minor leagues. Or the flip side of that is, this kid just got called up to the major leagues.
Right.
The thrill of it on one side, the disappointment
on the other side. And
so there's a lot of that stuff that's going on all the time. And then, of course, we're human beings, so sometimes clubhouses have great chemistry, and sometimes clubhouses don't have great chemistry.
Sure.
And so there's that stuff that goes on too, right?
Yeah.
And a losing streak might be because you're playing bad, but it might also be because there's some bad stuff going on in the clubhouse. So there's a little bit of that kind of stuff that happens that the average fan doesn't really pay much attention
Awesome.
to.
Appreciate that. All right, I'll get you out on here on this. Rapid fire. Just your immediate gut reaction. First question. Your best sports game or performance. Your best sports game or performance. Does a memory come to mind?
That I ever had?
Yes.
Yeah, I for Kowalski, the team that I played for that won the national championship, I think one game I went 3 for 4 and hit a grand slam.
Wow.
And so that was top of the mountain for me.
Awesome. Most impactful coach in your life?
I would say it would be Tom Engel, who coached that national championship team, because he was 27 coaching 16-year-olds, but he had a way about him that he expected us to be really good. He expected, quality out of all of us, but he also knew how to, and he knew how to kick us in the pants at times when we needed it, but he also knew when to put his arm around us and say, I know you're going through a tough time. Let's go. You're better than this. Let's go. So I think I admired him probably more than anybody.
Okay. This is a non-sports question. Thinking about your time at the DRC, you've been there now 11 years,
yeah.
Right? So something that you now understand clearly that before you started working at the DRC was fuzzy, or you really didn't get it?
I think what I understand better now is how many business leaders in this town are truly outstanding, and how much they enjoy working together for the good of our community. And that doesn't happen in every community. There's a lot of competition in a lot of communities. There's a lot of infighting.
Yeah.
This CEO wants more limelight than this CEO, and they can't quite get along.
Yeah.
I don't see much of it here, and I feel that that's a bit of the secret to our success.
Awesome. All right, a couple more. Other than the job you have right now, the best job you've ever had?
That's a hard one, because I loved them all. I loved working in the Reagan White House. I loved National Geographic. I loved the Baseball Hall of Fame. I mean, that's really hard. I can't really.
So those are your top 3?
Those are my top 3. Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Favorite sports movie of all time?
Probably Hoosiers.
Okay.
I just loved that movie, and I love Gene Hackman in that movie, and it was a moment in time, a small town team that takes on the big inner city team, and because of the belief of the coach, and he gets them to win. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm a big Hoosiers fan too. All right, last question. A recent book that you've read that you'd recommend for our listeners, a recent book. And you gave me a great one years ago, The Man Who Ran Washington, I think is what it was called.
James A. Baker.
Yeah, that was a really good one.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Gosh, man, I don't have a lot of time to read these days, unfortunately. There's a good one out about George H.W. Bush right now, and it's called Character Matters.
Okay.
Written by Gene Becker, his chief of staff.
Okay.
And it really is about the man, George H.W. Bush, and he was just a wonderful, wonderful human being.
Okay. Awesome. So to the listener, I'm going to turn to you for just a second and maybe just wrap up with some key insights that I thought were awesome today. One of them is that, no matter what your role on the team, second baseman, shortstop, you got to do your job. And it's very, very important. Part of what Dale shared is that he loved about sports is that there's a scoreboard and there's a team and there's a human side of this thing. It's not just the blocking and tackling or the throwing of the ball. It's the human element as well. The idea that a resident assistant can also gain leadership experience and knowing when to kick a guy in the pants, as Dale said, or when to sort of give him a hug and pat him on the back, and recognizing that early in his career. I think that was useful. I'm going to call it the first merger, business merger, right? The idea that you link up with a partner who values your success and you value their success, and you build a life together. 52 years of marriage, or 52 years together, 46 years of marriage, I think is pretty special and has been a big part of Dale's success in his life. Relationships and the idea that they can be both long as well as go deep on relationships, and just never knowing how a relationship today could really matter in the future. And maybe the last thing is passion. The fan club of the Mayo Smith Society, and how that ended up leading to an opportunity to go be the president at the National Baseball Hall of Fame is just incredible. Pursue passion over riches, at least for the long term. That's my takeaway. So those are my thoughts for the post-game summary. Dale, any parting thoughts from you before we go?
Well, I think this has been a wonderful interview. Thank you, and I loved your questions. I love talking about leadership. I love the linkage of sports and leadership, because I think there is a real strong bond between sports and leadership. I'll tell you a story. We have 2 young women on our staff, and they are going to have amazing careers. One was a star tennis player at Texas Tech. The other was the national champion equestrian captain of the number 1 team in the nation, equestrian team in the nation at Texas A&M. And they just know how to get it done. They understand how to get after it every single day. And I just see sports coming through them into the work world now.
Nice.
And so if I have a chance to hire people, and I know that they've been pretty good athlete, or they care a lot about sports, or they know how to win, I'm going to go for them every time. So I think the linkage of sports and business is pretty strong.
Awesome. Well, it's been great to have you on, Dale.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks for coming on.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for listening. If you got value from this podcast, don't keep it a secret. Subscribe, leave a rating or a review, and share it with someone you know. Until next time, remember, our world is starving for bona fide leaders. Take your leadership to the next level by applying at least one thing you heard today.